Happy Monday, everybody. First of a doubleheader tonight. Fire Up Florida is where we're at. And my co-hosts tonight are Rod Peterson of Cats and Bolts Podcast. Welcome back, Rod.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, George. How you doing? And George Eichhorn. Well, wherever I go, he goes. So
hello.
Yeah, I have a feeling we have an active chat room tonight. Yeah, early show, right? D-Lows. You got, we try to keep it around 7:45 Eastern time. Doubleheader tonight with 108 Stitches baseball talk as well. So we have pretty much three topics, and if the chat room gets active, then they're going to provide the difference. Joshua Dorr, what's going on SFT, the best show? Well, be the best show if you guys keep participating, spreading the word. We always like everybody go out there and subscribe to the South Florida YouTube channel. I'm trying to make sure that all the depth on these shows is good. That's why I want a lot of veterans to be a part of my crews. Don't mind a few young guys that are in there if they're mature enough to be able to do what we've got to do. And D-Lo says I have to catch the Musk-Trump interview on X starting at 8. Okay, well, have fun. That's all I can tell you. Topics, 2 Florida Panther topics and a Detroit Red Wings one. Whatever else the chat room goes out there and spits out as well. All right, well, let's talk about the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. They will square up on December 16th. The reigning Stanley Cup champions are 6-4 in the first game against their final opponent, dating back to 2014, 2015, with one of those losses occurring when the Panthers defeated Vegas on December 23rd, 2023. 4-2. 4-2 was the score of that contest. Well, Rod, there you go. The rematch set.
Since we last talked, I don't know if we talked about this last week, but NHL Network came out with their futures odds or their favorites to win the Stanley Cup this year. They've got Edmonton number 1 and Florida number 2. So we can talk about regular season meetings and the rematch, but you guys have been around sports long enough to realize that those regular season rematches don't mean much. If it was a repeat in the Stanley Cup final, then we have something. But it's I'm in Canada now, as you guys know. I'm just down the road from Edmonton. I'm in Calgary as we speak, and they all think the Oilers are the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup this year. I'd be a little bit surprised, but do we expect the Florida Panthers to go back to the Stanley Cup for a third straight year? I'd like to see that.
Well, the fact of the matter is they went back 2 years in a row. In the first year, they backed into the playoffs, but all you have to do is back in and get in the tournament. And when you get in the tournament, then anything can happen. All right, Joshua Dorr, that's a dog check. We'll give you your dog check for the night. 1 dog check for the night is what the rule is. Okay, George, some thoughts about the rematch.
Rematches are always fun. I mean, you can't compare the excitement of when they met for the first time, or in this case, when they battled for Lord Stanley's Cup. The rematches are always fun. I always look forward to them. It's one of the things that you do in sports. You circle the calendar when you see the schedule come out for next season. I don't care if it's just hockey, baseball, basketball, whatever, football. You have certain games that are circled, and they always include the Stanley Cup champion rematch. It's an interesting game. There are people that have moved around. Tarasenko and several of the Panthers are gone, so they're going to have to face some decisions on who makes the cut. Same with the Oilers. All these teams, everybody shuffles the deck, as you guys know, during free agency. So it is going to be interesting to see. I wouldn't discount what you said, Rod, about the Oilers at all. I mean, they've got the experience, just like Scott talked about with the Panthers previously, going to the finals and then not making it. And you got a similar situation with Edmonton. They've got the experience now. They're hungry. But yeah, as far as one game goes, sure, it's not going to decide anything really, but it is fun to see you go up against the 2 final teams, obviously for the Stanley Cup. That's always an exciting thing, I think.
That's a good point
for the viewers.
That's keeping it positive. That's a really good point. But, I was on another show last week talking about the turnover with the Panthers. You mentioned Tarasenko. You want to mention a couple other names. Oliver Ekman-Larsson to the Leafs, Anthony Stolarz to the Leafs, Brandon Montour to the Seattle Kraken, Josh Maher to the Seattle Kraken. A quarter of the team's gone, if not more. You know, that's just sports now in 2024, or this is this era now. I think it'll be fun to see the jerseys collide, but I don't expect a lot of huge emotion that night. That's just me.
Well, the reality of the situation is when you win the Stanley Cup, when it's going to happen, everybody wants to simply get paid. And when you compare the salary cap in the National Hockey League, okay, versus other ones, I think it's like in the 80 million range. So you know, you're going to pay your premium players what you are. You're going to have a lot more long-term contracts to try to eat away at that salary cap number, but you still have to have enough money within the cap, okay, to be able to get reinforcements if guys goes down. So, you know, for the Panthers to lose a handful of players, to me, doesn't really surprise me at all.
No. It does happen, yeah.
I mean, that's just hockey the way things are. Joshua Dorr has an opinion most Detroiters would certainly like Red Wings winning the Cup this season. Well, wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice. But let's
try making the playoffs.
Yeah,
that's the first step.
Yeah, they have an 8-year drought, but I was telling somebody earlier today that, you know what, when you have an 8-year drought, but you win in there 25 straight years, that's pretty good. And then, surprise, it is a rebuild, but so be it. You know what? Who can be ashamed of what they accomplished during the run? And we're going to actually talk a little bit about the Red Wings in a few minutes. So Joshua went out there and more or less, you know, set the table. Ball bust, calm down. Yeah, you're telling me, is that a ball bust from you? Calm down. Yeah, you don't want no wishful thinking there, do you, Josh? But that's okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and stay on the Panthers theme, okay? Get this. The flight time from Edmonton, Alberta to Fort Lauderdale, Florida is 5 hours and 36 minutes. The total distance is 2,542.44 miles. So the main question is, should the NHL go to a 2-3-2 format in the Stanley Cup Finals? You know, I mean, to me, this is unbelievable. I mean, then you talk about potential Florida, LA. Don't have to worry about Phoenix anymore, but then Florida to Seattle, Tampa Bay, all these Eastern teams, especially Southeastern teams, are going to be taking some long flights. So let's start with you, Rod. 2-3-2.
Well, you know, I would like to talk to the Panthers and the Oilers about that as to how they feel. Up until this Stanley Cup final, the most recent one in 1994 was the longest up till that point. Vancouver Canucks, New York Rangers. This one set the record, but that was a long one. Then the schedule was identical in 1994 to what it was now. So they didn't feel the need to change it then. So I don't know why they would feel the need to change it now. It was a lot of travel, and the drama involved was incredible, right? With all the Panthers staff and families coming up for Game 4 in Edmonton, thinking they were going to complete the sweep, and then it didn't happen, and the back and forth. Just talking to the media guys, because I wasn't traveling it, I can't imagine being the players. The media were worn out. It's a really good suggestion, but you kind of got to move heaven and earth in the National Hockey League and pro sports to make this happen. I can't see it happening. What do you think, George?
I'm for it. I'm for it happening because, you know, baseball has been very successful for many, many years doing it. And I'm not trying to say you have to do everything another league does, but this is really, really a grind. And then what it did is it added on to the season because they had to build in extra days where they could for that schedule. And you risk the chance anytime you do that of losing more fans, because think about this. You're in June, you're in the season of graduations and weddings and vacations, and kids are getting out of school and they want to go somewhere. It's not the greatest time for the NHL to try to increase their audience. Yeah, you'll have always have the loyal hockey diehards. But if you want to make this thing more competitive and try to save on some of the costs involved, like Scott just mentioned, I mean, you got the salary cap. You got a league that for years they've always watched the budget, whether it was Gary Bettman or anybody else before him. I'm just saying that, you know, the little things that they could do to cost save, to me, makes a lot of sense. The newspapers and the radio stations and the TV stations and the internet people, oh my God, they lost their shirt on this with these back and forth flights. I'm just looking at it from that standpoint, and I know it doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of fans, but I love 2-3-2 in the World Series, and I would love it in the other. Well, it would be the other sport would be NBA and the NHL. So that's just my feeling on it. My gut feeling says, do it.
All right, well, let's go to Joshua's door real quick. He says, leave it as it is. He emphasized that twice in the chat. I get it. Okay. You like the format as it is. Josh, don't do the traveling, then I guess you could like the format. But since you're out there watching on TV, it's no big deal. All you need to do is go from work to the house. But if you have to fly 2,542 miles or whatever I just said, which was that, it's a different story. But you can't compare baseball and hockey is right. Although you want to sit here and take your shots at baseball, this boring hockey is exciting. That's just a personal opinion.
Yeah.
Because Josh, you haven't played chess enough to understand baseball enough, and nor do you want to. But the reality of the situation is when you travel cross country, I remember doing it with the Lions a lot. George, remember when I went to go to Detroit to Oakland and back coast to coast? It's not an easy thing to do. But the 2-3-2 format does make a lot more sense, especially in situations like this.
It does from a business standpoint. I can tell that you guys have both been around the game a real long time, because you're looking at it from the business standpoint, which the fans don't, but the teams do, the owners especially, right, George? I looked at what they were paying for flights for the South Florida media to go to Edmonton. I'm like, you poor buggers, what you guys are paying for hotels and the flights, is insane. The fans don't care, right?
No, they don't.
They don't care, and it also did not hurt the quality of hockey. I'm sure it was unreal wear and tear on the bodies of the players, but that Game 7 was fantastic. And as we've discussed on this show, the second most viewed Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final ever. So the fans don't care. It'll come down to money, like George says, and I don't know that the owners care about money costs because they're making so much. They're just coming off that $6.2 billion year. We've discussed that before. So I'm actually at an NHL player's house right now. So I can't wait for this to be over. I'm going to run in and ask him what he thinks, but I'm pretty sure he'll say that it should go to 2-3-2 as well.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is, you talk about that $6.2 billion profit, which for the NHL is pretty good, even though they're really the fourth on the food chain in terms of major. I get that, but the reality of the situation is this, okay? The 2-3-2, when you have a lot of distance. Did you have a chance to attend any Stanley Cup final games when you were in Edmonton?
No, I was already into the baseball season. Baseball had started, and the Panthers going to the Stanley Cup put a kink in my work schedule. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But it's always an interesting topic of conversation. It really is when you're talking 2-3-2 or 2-2-1-1-1. And then you tack on the miles, 5 hours and what did I say? 5 hours and 36 minutes. And let alone changing time zone as well, trying to get acclimated to that area.
Yeah. Well, and it does hurt the small media guy, okay? Because that's a situation where the newspaper, the internet site, whatever it is that you or I are representing, they're taking a look at that and they're saying, heck no, we can't afford that. We can't send you to all 7 games if this happens this way. That's the thing too. I mean, yes, it's a business. I understand that. I get what you're saying, Rod. But I mean, I come from a hockey town, okay? Original 6 hockey town. They stopped covering the Stanley Cup finals. Are you kidding me? They stopped covering it years ago because the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press says, no, we don't have the money to do it anymore. And I'm talking some really good hockey writers here, as Scott knows. Helene St. James and Teddy Colfin, and they are denied. Their papers will never send them because of the cost involved. And again, it's sad because it's Detroit and it's a hockey city, Original 6. And I'm not trying to say, but
Well, it does come down to money. Yeah, I mean, Ted Colfin's a good friend of mine, one of the nicest people on the planet. I mean, but the reality of the situation is newspapers right now, as far as I'm concerned, are barely struggling to stay alive. You can just see, I mean, one of our local ones here, they're trying to form a union just to prevent anything from happening. Before we go any further away, but we're due for a station break, Candy, so go ahead.
You are listening to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. If you see that red subscribe button, hit it, like us, share us with all your friends and family. On Monday nights, we talk hockey, and then we talk baseball. Tuesday nights, we talk football. Wednesday and Thursday nights, you just never know what we're going to be talking. The South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book last November called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by Scott Motor City Madmouth Morganroth, and the foreword was written by George Eichhorn. Get your copy today on Amazon, Google, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Apple. Get your copy today. It talks about Scott's 40 plus years in the business and how media has changed over those years. Very interesting reads, lots of good stories, and a couple of cool pictures to boot. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can hear us wherever you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Deezer, Castbox, you name it, we're there. We have a website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You can read Scott's writing. You can see my pictures. You can see George's writing as well. And Rod's going to be writing for us soon as well. You can also get transcripts from the Dolphins, the Jags, the Lions. A lot of good content from local colleges down here in South Florida as well. Back to you, Scott.
Now, Josh, we didn't lose Rod. For all I know, he could be taking station identification out in Canada, for all I know.
Thank you. Hey? Yeah.
Or who knows what kind of guests he's lining up out there in Canada where it's all at. But yeah, I wrote that book. Looking forward to writing on. Here's Rod. All right. You lining up some guests at that little break, Rod, or what?
It's raining.
Oh, it's raining.
I put up the umbrella here, yeah.
Oh, okay, I got it. Oh, I was looking for it. Here we go. All right, we have one more topic to get to, and I might actually bring up another one that just came up across my wire service as well. We're going to go to the Red Wings. So Paveldatsyuk is the 10th player from the 2001 and 2002 Detroit Red Wings to be selected into the Hall of Fame. Another 9 include chrischeios, sergeifederov, dominikhasek, bretthull, igorlarionov, nicklaslidstrom, lucrobitaille, brendanshanahan, and steveyzerman. And let's not forget scottybowman as well as the coach. So we'll just give it 11. So pretty good group, huh, Rod?
Oh, yeah. I love the Hall of Fame. I do. To be honest, it used to be my favorite debate. You guys got to weigh in on this. Mine was the Hall of Fame debate in any league, but specifically Pro Football Hall of Fame and the Hockey Hall of Fame. Paveldatsyuk deserves to be there. But Hall of Fames have changed from what they used to be. And I'll give you a great example. You guys remember Ron Duguay. Okay, he was on my talk show last year when it was announced Henrik Lundqvist was going in. And Ron Duguay said, Rod, do you think he actually deserves to be in? He's not even the greatest Rangers goalie of all time, let alone a Hall of Famer. This was from Ron Duguay. And I was like, well, Ron, it doesn't matter whether you won anymore. It's a popularity contest, and Henrik Lundqvist is on the NHL on TNT. It's become a popularity contest. And Duguay was very disappointed. We all love Ron Duguay, right? But Datsyuk is a Hall of Famer. We can all agree on that. But I'm sitting here in Calgary, Alberta, where Theoren Fleury is not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I don't know how much you guys follow that or not, but even Theo will say, if anybody deserves to be in there, it's me. So my love for Halls of Fames or Hall of Fames has really diminished with it becoming a popularity contest. Now, again, Datsyuk belongs in there, but I don't think last year Pierre Turgeon did or some of these other guys. It's changed from what we covered back in the day. Agree or disagree?
Well, here, let me point this about the NFL. Number one, you have every market, trying to promote their own guy is what they're doing. And at some point they get in. When they get in is another story. I mean, I remember many, many years ago, Derek Thomas ultimately got in and he was killed, wasn't he? From Kansas City, but I knew it was a matter of time. So there's a little bit of politicking that goes behind it. There's no question about that. But let's just keep one focus here. Of that group, though, I mean, that's a pretty impressive group when you have 10 players from a given team. Now, albeit, I'll say that dominikhasek, bretthull, and lucrobitaille, got hardware that they hadn't been able to get anywhere else, or maybe added a piece or so here and there. But what do they always say? Once you get that championship, it's a whole lot better to win that championship than not have it. And a lot of these guys are able to do that. You know, Chelios, I think he won one prior to that before he went to Detroit. So, but
Montreal. In Montreal.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have another controversy brewing within this list about whether Sergeifederov's number should be retired in Detroit. And I can give you the reason why it isn't. He burned his bridges there, and the Illiches haven't forgiven him yet. You know, so if you want to leave Hockey Town on bad terms, what are the odds of you getting in there? I'd say pretty darn slim. So, you know, I understand that Hall of Fames are really predicated on popularity contests. It depends on who the voters are and all that. But Datsyuk deserved his due there, and it would be wise for the Red Wings to retire that number and hopefully come to the reality that they ultimately get Fedorovs at the stand too.
Was that number 13?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, George.
Well, Datsyuk deserves it. There's no question about that. He was a key part of that championship run for Detroit, and it was only a matter of time before he was going to make it. He doesn't come back very often. It's very rare. In fact, when we see him in Detroit, he was always a player that kept to himself anyways. You know, there was the language barrier for a lot of fans and media couldn't relate to him as much because of his Russian accent. But there are other people too. Chris Osgood. A lot of people in Detroit want Chris Osgood in that Hall of Fame. I mean, Hasek and Vernon, yes, but then Osgood's got 2 championships as well. So he doesn't seem to be getting much traction in the voting, but I certainly think he deserves to go. You know, as far as the Red Wings go, I mean, it's just an incredible group of guys. I mean, incredible. We all know what Jimmy Devellano and Mike Ilitch and Kenny Holland formed in Detroit, and that was get the best, and money doesn't make a difference back in the day when spending was so free. So it's an incredible opportunity for the Red Wings to capitalize, and they did. There's a lot of talk about the Fedorov thing, and like you said, Scott, I think it is personal. It's personal for Marian Ilitch, and probably the Ilitch, you know, maybe Chris Ilitch feels the same way. Maybe there's a situation where until, God forbid, she passes on, maybe they would think differently. But you got to remember one thing. The Ilitches prevented Red Kelly, a Hall of Fame defenseman, from being retired by the Detroit Red Wings until that man was less than 1 year from his death. And I'm never going to forget that, because you waited until that man was 90 years old before you brought him back and retired that number 4 jersey. That was unacceptable. And Red's a class guy, and thank God he said, okay, I'll go along with that. But that ceremony that I was at was how many years late in the making? Come on. So this is not unusual for them to hold back. They did it for Red Kelly, and yes, they're doing it for Sergei Fedorov. That's all I'm going to say. They're a great hockey family, and I know that. It's been a lot, and they've been everything to Detroit. But I'm sorry, what they did to him to hold him back too was just unforgivable.
All right, so Rod, I have a question for you. George brought up an interesting point. Now I want to ask you this question. Chris Osgood or Mike Vernon, who belongs in the Hall of Fame?
Okay, it's awesome you said that, because you guys are just floating a hanging curveball right over the plate for me. I'm a goalie guy and a hockey guy. So growing up, Mike Vernon was my guy, and he won Stanley Cups with 2 teams, the Flames and the Wings. So if you're asking who goes in first, it's Mike Vernon, but Chris Osgood has to go in too. And part of my problem here is that Henrik Lundqvist doesn't have any Stanley Cups. That's what I don't understand. So, you know, this is the debate that I do love. And I love being with 2 veteran media guys right now that you get it. I mean, nothing against Henrik Lundqvist. I'm sure he's a real nice guy. But you know what? Let's get in the guys that deserve it, and then we'll start with the popularity
with
contest.
the other, yeah.
All right, so George, I'm going to ask you that same question, and I'll provide my 2 cents on it. Osgood or Vernon, who would you put in first?
Well, Rod does bring up a great point. I mean, Mike did it in 2 different settings. He won the Cup with the Flames and the Red Wings. Osgood had a longer body of work, obviously, with 1 team, with Detroit. I'm going to have to say Vernon first. I'm going to go along with you, Rod, and that's because of the extended body of work and the fact that you're able to do it with 2 different wonderful franchises. I mean, they really are. I mean, say what you want about the Flames having to move and all that, but Calgary is a great, great hockey town, as we know, and so is Detroit. So, yeah, people in here might not like that, but I would say Vernon over Osgood first. But it's close. What about
It's very
Scott?
close. It's very close. It's a great question.
All right, but you know what? I'm going to make this totally unanimous, and I'll tell you what my reason is.
Wow.
Mike Vernon, okay, didn't just win a cup with Detroit. He broke it with a long drought. They snapped that drought against the Philadelphia Flyers. What was it, 40-some years before they had even won one? And all of a sudden, he gets it going. And all of a sudden, Dominikhasek and then Osgood proceeded to win. So the Red Wings were able to win cups with 3 different goaltenders. But Vernon is one. And I'll tell you another thing I like about Vernon. He ended up beating Patrick Waugh in a fight. And I love that fight over there. He got bloody. When Osgood had to take on Osgood had to take on Waugh. Waugh got the best of him. But Mike Vernon was a pesky individual. And he went out there and beat or TKO Patrick Waugh. So my reasons are, one, he broke the big drought, and he also beat Patrick Waugh on the ice when the goaltenders went at it. No disrespect to Chris. He certainly deserves it, but I'm going Mike Vernon first automatically, and this isn't even close.
No, I love Mike Vernon, and he's just a tiny little guy. Patrick Waugh is about 6'2", but I saw Vernon fight in junior, guys. I saw him fight forwards, not other goalies. I saw it with my own eyes. My kind of guy, Mike Vernon. So, little biased, but.
All right. You talk about you being biased. You got 3 people that agree with you.
Sorry. Yeah, 2 people.
Who?
You and George.
All right, we got 3 people that said Vernon. Seriously.
Okay, yeah. And maybe Candy makes 3.
Well, there you go. But I'm just giving you a hard time, Mr. Peterson. Wait till we go ahead and take our act and you get back to South Florida. We're going to be really dangerous. We're just building up for it now. All right. Well, you know what? We got room for one more topic, and I'm going to go ahead and mention it now. Okay. There's a report out there that the Toronto Maple Leafs are making a leadership change. Auston Matthews is expected to be named captain on Wednesday in favor of John Tavares. Tavares seems to really has no problem with the move. So what are your thoughts about this decision of Auston Matthews finally wearing the C?
Well, number one, it'll be national news in Canada for at least the next week. And I'll remind you, it's August. So welcome to Canada. Number 2, I was shocked that Auston Matthews signed the mega deal with the Leafs. He says he loves playing there. I wouldn't, but as a kid from Scottsdale and the pressure, now he's the highest paid player in the NHL and his deal kicking into next year. But I've seen him play in Sunrise multiple times. That kid works his butt off. He is the captain of that team. Tavares is not the player that he used to be. And that just says something about Johnny T, that he was willing to take the C off, step aside, because John is a Toronto guy, and give it to Auston Matthews. Everybody knew Auston Matthews was the leader. Now they're just making it official. And it's big news up here.
Well, Auston Matthews is a franchise player. The Red Wings never had any luck when it came to getting the number 1 pick, but Toronto's had him, and Connor Bedard obviously went to Chicago. He got a lot, but regardless, they find a way to make the best of what they have. And when they won a lot of those Stanley Cups, they didn't do it with the number 1 player in the draft. They were able to draft well throughout the draft, so that helped too.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm dying. You have threatened to talk about the Coyotes moving to Utah for weeks,
and
I can't. You keep saying that. Every week.
You know why? I'll tell you why. I'm bringing a 4th person on here so that we can really turn this into a 2-topic show.
Okay. Well, they thought that my friends owned the Coyotes. That's why. From about 2014 to 2019, the Ice Arizona group. And they had, you talk about Detroit wanting to draft Auston Matthews. Everybody wanted to draft Auston Matthews, but the Coyotes were in the lottery, and they thought they were going to win the lottery, get Auston Matthews, and he was going to save hockey in the Valley.
Yeah.
And he might have, but he ends up falling to the Leafs or going number 1 to the Leafs, and it never did happen. And they moved, but it's one of my favorite topics. So I can't wait till next week.
Well, we will. I tell you one thing about me, Rod. You know what? I'm one of those chess players that likes to move every piece on the board. Where do I want to slide it every week?
Okay.
And and let me tell you this. I had thought about it hard today, but elected not to, because if I could get 4 people to talk about it, 4 veteran hockey guys to talk about the move, I think it behooves itself to go ahead and wait one more week to do it. I think Mark should be fine. If he doesn't, we're going to talk about it anyhow. It's a topic I'm chomping at the bit to do. But the reality of the situation is this, okay? We know that the Phoenix Coyotes are no more. And there's another piece of information that I'm going to include on that topic as well. But I'm just going to leave it as a teaser out there for people to join us next week at the same time. So mark my word, Rod. George knows for all these times being around me that, all right, he's waiting. What is he going to do next? And you're just learning, my man. You are just learning, because I think there's a lot of people really would like to know about the Utah, but it's okay. One more week isn't going to make or break anything unless I go out there and do something stupid, which never know. But it looks like we lost Joshua. We never got Blake tonight. I understand why the other Lozinski left. I guess Elon Musk and Donald Trump are more important than our show. And these are the ones that lobby for hockey, but that's okay. I still am happy with the fact that we're able to go out there and talk about some interesting topics. And let's face the reality, when we talk about the Panthers in a couple instances where you have a rematch, and then you also have that travel, who in their right mind would not want to be able to talk about that travel? Because that's obviously the one thing that went on where they obviously broke the record for miles, is what they did.
Yeah.
So,
and my two cents about Matthews, he definitely deserves it. I mean, my God, twice he scored over 60 goals in this season. He is a leader. It's been a while. He's been developing his leadership skills and all that. So was the alternate captain. Was it just this past year, Rod, or has he been we're alternate for more than this year?
He has been for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. And so the big question mark is though, can he really lead them out of this funk that they're in, which is a tremendously disappointing postseason, which we don't want to get into, but obviously everybody knows about that. The elephant in the room: will Toronto ever win in the playoffs? But Matthews, yeah, he deserves it.
You've given me at least one task over the next week, and that's to find out about this 2-3-2 format, if the players would like to go to it, and if anybody thinks the NHL will. And number 2, guys, I know we got to run. I certainly do, but I've said if Mike Babcock can't be successful in Toronto and win a Stanley Cup, nobody can.
Really?
I think that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I guarantee you next week, no matter what, okay, we will talk about the Arizona-Utah, because I'm anxious to get it out there, but I just felt in my mind that if I can find another person to talk about it, and that allows us to really break it down. There'll be times, folks, when I'll go down to 3 topics, 2 if I think one's longer, or 4. It just depends on what I think we have. Because right now, technically speaking, okay, there are a lot of interesting topics during the offseason until things get interesting later on. All right, so Turbo Jetum says, sorry I'm late, had some stuff come up. Well, we're just about ready to wrap up the show anyways. So my advice, Turbo Jetum, is just watch it on the YouTube channel. All right, I know you got to get going, Rod. We have a show coming up. So with that said, Rod, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know how they can get a hold of you, and then we'll let you get going. Same time, same place next week. You enjoy your wife and whoever your other guest, but get ready. We will be talking about Utah and Arizona.
Hey, I'm teasing you, Scott. I know that topic's not going anywhere. We can do it anytime. But
I'm chomping at the bit to talk about it too. So you ain't teasing me. I'm ready to do it.
All right. At Rod Peterson. Well, you see it on the screen. At RODPEDERSEN. It's an odd spelling. It's Danish. At Rod Peterson. And our Florida podcast is at Cats and Bolts Podcast. Won an award for the fastest growing podcast in Florida, all genres, last year. It was a good time to start an NHL podcast in Florida. So Cats and Bolts is it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it as always. It was fun.
Thank you, Rod.
Thanks, Rod. We'll see you next Monday night. Okay.
You bet.
You bet.
Yes, see ya.
All right. And now there are 2 of us. All right, George, as you and I get ready at the top of the hour to talk about baseball. Why don't you let everybody know how they get a hold of you, your book?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can follow me at the South Florida Tribune. I write under the Motor City Tribune. And at the end of every column is a little link there to my book, which is Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. Thank you, Candy, for pointing that book out right over my shoulder here, or right above my head, I should say. And it's a good book. I mean, it's been out for a few years, but Scott and I, we were fortunate to work with so many great broadcasters in Michigan and in Detroit. And we have so many of them, including the great Ernie Harwell, in that book. And you can also find Scott in the book, too, as well. Some pictures of him when he was much younger, doing some great interviews. Also, you can find me at yahoo.com, at gicorn@yahoo.com, or else look for me on Twitter at SandGSports99. That's SANDG Sports, plural, 99. Look for me also on LinkedIn. I follow that. And of course, on Facebook as well, George Eichhorn. Good to be part of the action. Great show, Scott and Candy. And now we got another great one coming up with 108 stitches.
There you go. All right, Candy, take us to the finish line.
If you see that red subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner, that means you have not subscribed to us yet. I honestly don't understand why, but do it today. Make our day. You want to be the 1,000th and whatever we're up to at this point. But honestly, share us, like us, share us with all your friends, family, anyone that you think would enjoy our programming. On Monday nights, we talk hockey early. Then we talk baseball. Tuesday nights, we talk football inside the pigskin. Wednesday and Thursday nights, you never know what we're going to have on Sports Exchange or Fire Up. But if you like to listen to podcasts, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Deezer, you name it, we're there. The other thing is go to our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where you can see Scott's writing, George's writing, my pictures. But most importantly, there is a link to Scott's book. There is also a link to our merchandise store. Go out and get a South Florida Tribune hoodie or sweatshirt or tank top today. Also, Scott wrote a book. There's a link to it. The South Florida Tribune published it. It is called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by none other than Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth. And George wrote the foreword. It talks about Scott's years in the business, in the media business, and how it has changed over the 40 plus years. Some great, interesting stories. Some great, interesting media people that he talks about. Get your book today and see the picture of young Scott with a young Muhammad Ali. There is also, you can email us, southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Our Twitter handle or X is @TribuneSouth. If you would like to sponsor this show or any of our shows, or advertise on any of them, call Scott 954-304-4941. If I talk too fast, and I don't think I did tonight, but if I did, rewind and watch again. It's been scrolling on the bottom. Or if you're listening to the broadcast on one of the podcasts, rewind and listen again. Back to you, Scott. Great show tonight.
Thank you, Candy, and thanks to Rod, and as well as you, George. Well,
thank you.
You and I have 108 Stitches baseball talk at the top of the hour.
All
we'll
right.
be joined by Trent Clark, who used to be the strength and conditioning coach for the Detroit Tigers, and of course, Mark Maraday is back. Austin Matthews had an event to go at the last minute, and this is Eric Katz's night off. So, looking forward to baseball shortly. But meanwhile, we want to thank everybody for joining us on this edition of Fire Up Florida. And stay tuned. We'll be back with you at the top of the hour. Good night, everybody, and we'll see you next week on Fire Up Florida. Good night now.
Good night.